Welcome back to part 2. I'm sure you've got 1,000 questions like, why are there so many cables hanging off that bass guitar? All these questions and others will be answered, but let's get on with the episode. And before I do, I just want to ask you, please subscribe. It makes a big difference to all of us creators, and I'd really appreciate it. Anyway, let's get on with the show. And welcome back into the workshop. Here we are with our neck, and our real mission here is just to make this as smooth and as well profiled as we can. The profile of the neck is absolutely essential. I actually use a template, a neck template, a profile template. It's actually, I think, for a 52 Telecaster. As soon as I've got this nice and smooth, I can start thinking about adding the first layer of colour, because maple necks are funny. We have to colour them quite early because we put the frets on before we put the final finish on, and that's weird, but that's the way it's done. So we've got to make this absolutely right and get some finish on it. The thing about sanding is, and I keep saying it, is you have to keep going. You have to keep going until it's perfect. Because the moment you stop and say, that's it, that's the way it's going to be forever. So keep going until it's perfect. Making the neck smooth is absolutely essential, because the next stage after this is we're going to put some colour on. Now, some people will tell you, I only go to 250. And then another person will say, I go to 320 grit, which is much finer. I'm going to tell you that I actually go to all of them. I go to 240, then I go to 320, and then actually before I apply any dye onto the neck, I go to 600. It's completely unnecessary. It just makes me feel good because it feels so good. So this neck feels absolutely dreamy to me now. I'm happy with the profile. I'm happy with the smoothness and the contours. So I'm going to put some colour on this. I've discovered through experience quite a clever thing to do is to put some colour on the neck using a water-based colour first. It's a personal preference. You don't have to do it this way, but this is the way that I do it. So it's been about 45 minutes to an hour, and this is now bone dry, and I can feel the grain has been raised, and it's actually much darker than I thought it was going to be. But I'm going to hit this with some 320 or 600. I'm going to knock this back, and I suspect this will become quite a little bit lighter. Last time I did this, it was around about this stage of doing it that I thought I'd really messed this up. It's looking a bit blotchy. Some places it's gone quite light, other places it's gone quite dark still. I can't get it off evenly, and I really thought, you know what, this is just a waste of time. I don't know why I did this. But the interesting thing was, I sprayed it with some weak amber, and I was really quite surprised. In fact, I was elated by what happened next. I just hope it happens again, and I'm not really convinced yet. But let's try it. For some reason, just that coat of watercolour on it before you give it that weak amber first coat of nitro, which needs to be the thinnest possible, and we've got something with real depth to it. It's quite yellow at the moment, but this is quite normal with this weak amber. It always comes out looking a little bit sort of yellowy. Over the next few days it'll tame itself down, and then I'll start putting clear coats on top. But it's looking great to me already. Welcome back to Philosophy Corner, except this time it's not really a corner. I'm in Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris. Now this may seem a very depressing place to do such a thing as Philosophy Corner from, but I get asked a lot about failure, and failure is a fact of life. I mean, we all fail at everything all the time. And I think it was the French philosopher Jean-Paul Perdue who said, it's not our failures that define us, it's how we recover from them. I get lots of people send me messages saying, I'd like to have a go at this. I'd like to build my own guitar, but I'm actually worried I might fail, or they don't feel that they've got the abilities, or that it might be just a disaster. But the thing is not to be flattened by that, but to pick yourself up, think of a way out of it, and the way that you get out of it will be what defines you, not the failure itself. About now would be a really good time to admit that Jean-Paul Perdue was entirely made up, just to make a point. So that's the end of my treatise on failure, just as it begins to pour with rain, and the place is shutting. Anyway, that's all from Philosophy Corner. Let's get back to the build. When will it ever stop raining? Well, here I am back in London, no longer in Paris, so I can get rid of these silly props, and we can get back on with our build. The build is progressing, but is it the progress I want? I've got to be honest with you. This looks about as yellow as it was before I took the yellow finish off. It's not quite as bad as that, but it's nearly there. It's also a bit denser, a bit darker than I was expecting. I was hoping it was going to be a bit lighter. I have an idea about what I want to do with the body, and some people will like it, some people will hate it. That's always the way. But there's something about this neck that doesn't work for me. It's too dense and it's too yellow. So I have a decision to make. Do I press on with this and live with it? Or do I stop at this point and strip all this off and do it all over again? And I think I'm going to do it all over again. I can smell the nitrocellulose as it comes off, and it's just a really upsetting smell. One of the great things about having a YouTube channel is the way that you interact with people, and I get asked a lot of questions. But recently, the most common question I'm asked is, how's the French thing going, Chris? And the answer is terrible, thanks. The French property market has all but collapsed at the moment, which means I can't sell my French property, and I can't buy the property that I really want in France, so I can't move. Yeah, terrible things. Nearly there. Well, that took about an hour. And if you add that to the 3 weeks which have elapsed since I actually did the first coat and let it cure, it's quite a waste of time really, and disappointing, but you have to put it all behind you and move on. I'm just going to get a nice clean bit of my cloth, and I'm going to move quite quickly, and hopefully I won't get it everywhere. So here we go, colour on. That in itself already looks better. Let's try and get some on this headstock. Good. Whip around the edges. I don't want any depth of colour to build up here. I'm actually already worried that there might be a little bit too much pigment even in this thinned down version, because this is actually approaching the colour that I want without any of the top coat on it. I have a feeling I might have to go straight to a gloss on this and skip the weak amber entirely. Tricky decisions. Of course, this has raised the grain as well, so I'm going to have to give it a light sand, if only to knock the grain down a little, cut that off. So that's done. Well, as is so often the case in the UK, it's 24 hours later and we have a new season. Yesterday it was pouring with rain, it was stormy, wet, so wet, and yet here we are and it's like August, which it is, August. Anyway, let's go and have a look at this, this neck and see how that's worked out. And here we are. So, let's have a look. Now that looks better to me. I have a confession to make though. This isn't the finish you just saw me putting on. This is a completely different finish. I stripped it all off again and refinished it from scratch. It seems excessive, I know, 3 attempts to get this, and it shouldn't have been this complicated, but whilst I was doing the last finish, you heard me say things like, I think I should stop here, maybe I should just go with the water dye. Well, that's what this is. I just put the water dye on it, and then I sprayed it with a clear nitrocellulose, and here it is. And this is what I was aiming at, and I'm much happier. So, finally, we have a neck. Let's go on with the rest of the build, shall we? Well, I don't know about you, but I'm sick and fed up of actually finishing guitar necks. So let's do something different. I'm going to start finishing the body. And one of the most important things to do when you start to do the body, after sanding it to the absolute point of destruction, is to seal it. And I'm going to use some nitrocellulose sanding sealer, which I've had for years, and I'm not even sure you can get this stuff anymore. But once this is gone, I'm in trouble. Anyway, I'm just going to pour a little bit on there. It's a lovely thing to do because immediately I can see the grain of this piece of wood, which of course, unfortunately, I'm going to be covering up. Sanding sealer is wonderful stuff. It stops your finish disappearing into the wood itself, and it starts to fill in a lot of those holes and potholes in the top of the guitar that will suck up the finish. Okay, I think that's the front covered. Right, let's start doing some sides. I can remember struggling with finishing. One of the big turning points was when I started to use sanding sealer. Without it, it's really an uphill battle. Sanding sealer, this one anyway, sets really quickly, which is fantastic. So as soon as you've done the front, you can start doing the back. You don't need to sit there for 20 minutes waiting for it to dry. It dries really quickly. This is now completely dry to the touch. Of course, it's at this point you go, wow, the grain structure on that is so beautiful, I must just keep that and not paint it at all. This happens every time. You take one look at it with one coat of sanding sealer on it and decide to do it as a natural finish guitar. And it's a thought, but I'm going to stick to my guns. I've got too many simple wood finish guitars, and I vowed not to make any more. Okay, sanding sealer applied. I'm going to let that dry for about, I don't know, 10 minutes. Then I'll give it a light sand. Job done. better way to waste 10 minutes than to wander around your garden. Quite a lot going on in my life recently. We went off for quite a long trip to France in our never-ending quest to find a new home there, and well, we might have some news soon, who knows. There's a lot to do, so sometimes the guitar making has to take the back seat. But I'm back at it now. Some people stop watching apparently as soon as I start relicking. It's not always relevant, and I know some of you absolutely hate it, so I apologise in advance, but that's just the way it is. Skip over it because there's good stuff on the other side of that process, particularly setting up, fretting and all the other processes. So don't miss out just because you don't like that bit, and maybe you'll come to appreciate it. Time to go and see if it's dry. I think we can get on with some sanding. Now that's been sitting around for maybe 10 minutes and it's gone off. I mean, it's absolutely rock hard. So I'm going to give it a touch of 320 just to take it back nice and smooth. Let's get on. Okay, so now it's time to unveil what I'm going to do with the final finish. Those of you who've seen my builds before know that I use like a solid colour. I've done just straight wood stains in the past. But when you keep changing colours and stains, you end up with a lot of cans of bits that you've got left. And I have an idea. It may not work, it may look great, it may look horrendous. If it looks horrendous, I'll scrape it all off and do it, I don't know, gold or something. But what I'm thinking is that I'm going to spray all of these little bits I've got. I've got a bit of Fiesta Red here. I've got some Tobacco Brown. I've got some Daphne Blue, funny enough. And I've got some orange and various bits and pieces of paint. And I'm going to spray little patches of these colours all over the guitar under the primer, and then I'm going to put Olympic White on top. Now the idea is that I'm going to scratch away bits of the Olympic White to reveal a whole plethora of bin end colours underneath. And hopefully it will give the impression that the guitar has had a long and illustrious life and has been resprayed by many owners many times, and all of these colours are coming through the Olympic White as it gets chipped off or scraped off or just worn off. That's the idea. It may look absolutely horrendous, but you know, I'm an art school boy and I have a funny feeling in my water that it might look quite funky. But as I say, if it doesn't, I'll scrape it all off and do something else. But I'd like to give this a go, if only just to use up all these bin ends of cans of paint that are just going to end up in the bin anyway. So let's give it a go. Well, that felt pretty nuts. It looks absolutely horrendous, but you know, we always knew that was going to happen. So I'm going to leave that to go hard, then I'll flip it over. Well, this can go one of two ways. It's either going to be a howling success or a howling failure. I don't know which. It's quite radical. It's quite striking. There's definitely a sort of Hendrix vibe going on here. Don't worry, it's not going to stay like this. Or if you like it, get help. But you know, what is life without a bit of experimentation, hey? Last step. We're going to put some primer on this. Do you think it'll work? I think it will. Let's find out together on the next show. So keep building and please subscribe.